I think I'm in the webinar.
No, you're good.
Okay. Did anybody here, did Crystal say, are we live?
Yes, we are live and ready to go.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed that, Crystal. Okay. So I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome everyone to the meeting. The meeting is being held electronically in accordance with Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001. The procedures for the meeting are as per the town's procedural bylaw and the electronic meeting protocol during emergencies. I can confirm that we do have all members present. Although I'm not seeing Jason. So we do have quorum though. So we can proceed with the meeting without doing a roll call. We've changed it up a little bit today. So with that, I'll ask if there are any members who have a disclosure of pecuniary interest. Okay, seeing none. I do have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the Planning Committee agenda dated November 11th, 2020 be hereby adopted as printed and circulated. All those.
Jason's not here. No.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stone. You're right. He's not here. So I will take that out and put in Councillor Weeb. He's here. All those in favor? That's carried. And I did it backwards. I already asked about the disclosures of pecuniary interest. Uh-oh. I hope I won't be in trouble. I don't think so. I'm not getting any nods from anybody around me. So there we go. So the first item on our agenda is a deputation from Chris Zanetti. And I would ask our clerk if she could bring Mr. Zanetti in at this time. It's very youthful. It's a youthful Chris and Eddie. Are you there, Chris? Oh, there he is. Chris, your mute is on. Chris, your mute, okay, there we go. I think your mute is off and hopefully we can hear you.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
They can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes, thumbs up.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. I'll just let my assistant here go, who knows more about the computer stuff than I do. Okay, thanks for hearing me. So this is regarding the application I started back in January, I guess, regarding severing a piece of property in Port Sydney, and went through the process. And then back in July, you guys had a planning meeting, and my application was approved for the severance. The zoning amendment application number was Z/08/2020/HTE. And then there was a consent application. That number was B/15/2020/HTE. And the severing of the lot was approved. And then to move forward, I had to meet several conditions. And one of them was, of course, an appraisal, or not an appraisal, and where you get the, what's that called? Where you get the lot, he's measured by just a minute, a severance, sorry.
Right.
Anyone want to help me? What do you get? What's that called? I'm just getting a blank here. Where you get the surveyor surveyed. So the property was surveyed.
Say
So
survey.
when the survey, yeah, sorry about that. When the survey came back, it's the amount of square meterage on the lot was slightly less than what was put down in the bylaw. So therefore, necessitating a minor variance application to be put in. And that's the reason for this deputation, is Curtis has informed me that I need to apply for a minor variance to make the two numbers meet what was put on the bylaw, which is a little bigger than what the actual survey came in at. So if there's any technical questions, Curtis certainly could answer them, but it seems to me that I'm going around. I was asked to do all these things, which we did. We met all the requirements, and now we're asked to sort of do a full circle and do another minor variance application. So I'm wondering where we go from here. I just need a resolution saying that that's okay, that I put in a minor variance. And that's basically it, so.
Okay, thank you for that, Chris. So in essence, it was just describing the process that you've been through and the fact why you're coming back to committee, and that there was a slight discrepancy in the original number, and then the bylaw did not reflect, it reflected a different number.
Right.
Maybe I could, if you wouldn't mind, I think I will ask Curtis if you could just fill in anything that might be helpful for committee to understand what happened a bit.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think Chris did a good job of summarizing it, but essentially the bylaw that was passed, we reduced the lot area requirement for a new lot to 1,935 meters squared. When the survey came back, each lot appeared to have 1,860 meters squared. So that's the discrepancy. To resolve the issue, there's sort of two processes. Chris could either apply for another zoning bylaw amendment or a minor variance. And given that it's such a minor change, I think he felt that the minor variance was the most appropriate. The rub here is that Section 45 of the Planning Act prohibits the submission of a minor variance application within 2 years of a zoning bylaw amendment being passed. The Planning Act does allow the submission of a minor variance if council passes a resolution to allow the applicant to submit the minor variance. So that's essentially what I believe Chris is asking you here today. He's saying, I have a discrepancy with the lot area that was granted. Council, will you allow me to submit a minor variance to correct that?
Okay, that's helpful because it's within that 2-year period. And so therefore we have to, okay. And that requires the approval of council.
Yeah.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's
Are there-
entirely correct.
Okay. Are there questions from committee members with respect to either Chris or Curtis? Okay. Oh, Councillor Stone.
It seems a no-brainer to me. Is that something we just put on the books right now? Do we wait till the end of the meeting? Or I'm happy to make a motion to that effect.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Councillor Stone. We do have a motion prepared that we have to wait until the end of this meeting and put it under new business, which is normally what we would do, but we weren't sure. And therefore, I will at that time be asking for 2/3 approval from committee to consider it. But that's helpful that you put your name on that. So that's great. Thank you. And now that I've said that, I don't need to convey that to Chris because now you know we will consider that if committee is so obliged that we at the end of the meeting.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we let Mr. Zanetti go? Okay, thank you very much for that. And after whatever decision is made, I'm sure that Curtis will get back to you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Alcock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I will let Crystal do her magic, and then we will proceed to the next part of our agenda, which is our public meeting. So again, I would like to welcome everyone to the public portion of the meeting to consider applications to amend zoning bylaw 2008-66P pursuant to section 34 of the Planning Act. The procedure of the public meeting will be as follows. A brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and any correspondence received to date will be given by staff. The applicant or their representative will be asked to provide any additional comments without repeating the information already outlined by staff. Any members of the public present will then be permitted to ask questions or provide comments respecting the applications. Committee will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the planner, or anyone giving presentations. Once the public meeting is concluded, the input received and proposed amendments will be considered by committee and council. Any persons making representation are requested to first state their name and mailing address. Please note that presentations are limited to 10 minutes. And also please be informed that an appellant must provide an oral submission at the public meeting or written submission prior to the passage of the zoning bylaw. Otherwise, the local planning appeal tribunal may dismiss the appeal. If you wish to be notified of the passage of a zoning bylaw, you must file either with the recording secretary or with the clerk a written request for notification prior to the passage of the proposed zoning bylaw. Each notice of complete application and public meeting included an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed amendment, and notice was required to be posted at the subject lands. Notice was therefore considered to have been provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and applicable sections of the Huntsville Official Plan. So with that, we will now deal with the application Z24-2020 HTE, and that is over to you, Curtis. You're already there and ready to go.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. Members of committee and those members of the public with us here today. The subject lot is located at 758 Canal Road. The lot is designated rural and zoned conservation. The lot was created through a consent application in 2002 with the intent that it would be developed as a rural estate subdivision. As part of the application, the lot was rezoned from a rural 1 zone and a rural residential zone to an open space zone with an exception to prohibit all development. The purpose of the rezoning appears to have been to serve as a holding zone until such time as a subdivision application is approved. In 2008, as part of the comprehensive zoning bylaw update, the zoning was changed from an open space zone with the exception prohibiting development to a conservation zone. The purpose and effect of this application is to rezone the lands from a conservation zone to a conservation zone with an exception to require the maintenance of existing natural vegetation within 30 meters of 3 streams located on the subject lands, and to a rural residential zone with an exception to recognize the existing lot frontage as meeting the requirements of the zoning bylaw. Additionally, restrictions would be placed to prohibit tree clearing between, or essentially to protect bird and bat maternal roosting periods. And that timing window would fall between April 16th and October 14th. This designation anticipates single detached dwellings located on large lots which front on existing year-round maintained publicly owned roads. In this case, the subject lot has 23 meters of road frontage, whereas 29 meters of frontage is required to recognize the lot as buildable. The official plan permits the recognition of lots that do not meet the minimum frontage area requirements of the zoning bylaw, provided sufficient lot area exists to address water supply, sewage disposal, lot character, and the applicable natural heritage policies. In this case, sufficient lot area exists outside the identified constraint areas to site a dwelling, well, and septic system. Regarding character, although the lot generally has a smaller frontage than the lots in the surrounding area, it has ample area towards the interior of the lot, which would allow a dwelling to be constructed amongst the existing natural vegetation in a manner that would be in keeping with the official plan. To identify the natural heritage constraints, an assessment was completed by Riverstone Environmental Solutions, which identified the 3 watercourse features on the subject lands as cold water streams. The author recommended a 30-meter setback for all development from the edge of the watercourse, as well as restrictions on tree clearing outside of bird and bat maternal roosting periods, again, between April 16th and October 14th, which will be permitted through the bylaw exceptions. Please note that the draft bylaw included in the agenda package did not include a provision to implement the recommended tree clearing window. Should committee choose to approve this application, the exception will be updated prior to the bylaw being ratified by council, and the resolution before committee today also includes that timing window. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. 2 letters of support and a letter of objection was received. The letter of objection raised concerns regarding the potential for tree removal on the subject lands. I would note that the conservation zone would not prohibit the removal of trees currently. This proposal includes restrictions to maintain a large swath of conservation zone lands adjacent to the identified cold water streams, with protections to prohibit tree clearing. I would also note that the proposed RR zone would only permit the construction of a single family dwelling and associated accessory structures, which is low impact in nature. As such, the appropriate restrictions appear to be in place to protect the natural integrity of the lot. The application appears to conform to the policies of the official plan and provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval.
Thank you very much, Curtis. I would now call upon the applicant or their representative to provide any additional comments.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 if you are connected by phone to indicate they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcock, I see 1 hand raised. Please note that during the transition, your video panel will be momentarily interrupted. Once you've been added to the meeting, your video will appear in the committee member panel. Please have your microphone and video, if possible, turned on before you begin speaking, and confirm your name and mailing address.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor and Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for taking the time to hear this application. My name is Helena Kramer, and I am the agent authorized to act on behalf of the applicant, Dennis Zazdanovich, and I'm from Marie Poirier Planning and Associates, and we're at 44A King William Street here in Huntsville, P1H1G3. So I'd also like to thank planning staff for working with us cooperatively to bring this application forward. I concur with Mr. Sirvett's presentation outlining the application and development proposed on the property and further concur with staff's recommendation to approve the application. I understand, however, there was a letter of objection received from the president of the Woodland Heights Community Association, Ross Mound, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to address the concerns noted in his letter. The first concern noted was regarding the importance of preserving areas zoned conservation to meet the town's environmental goals and climate concerns. It was noted in both ours and town planning staff's reports that the reason the conservation zone was instated on the subject property was to act as a holding zone that was to remain in place until a further application to subdivide the land was submitted, essentially forcing a full planning review in order to develop the property. The development proposed now, that being a single family dwelling and permitted accessory structures, is significantly less intense than the rural estate subdivision that was planned for the property at the time this holding zone was instated. In terms of the preservation of sensitive areas, through the application process, town staff identified streams present on the subject property and requested that we complete a stream assessment to ensure the proposed dwelling could be appropriately set back from streams on the property. We retained Riverstone Environmental to complete the stream assessment and identify the appropriate setback. This setback of 30 meters has been incorporated into the proposal as the conservation zone is being maintained in this setback, ensuring the area will not be disturbed. For our own due diligence and town staff's pre-consultation comments, we had the property reviewed for septic suitability by a professional engineer. The review was included in the application package and concluded that there's ample room available on the property to develop it with a residential dwelling and septic. The remaining concerns in Mr. Mound's letter pertain to the proximity of the subject property to the Woodland Heights neighborhood and expressed concern regarding the removal of trees on the subject property. Respecting the removal of trees, the provincial policy statement, a document which all planning policy and applications are required to be consistent with, provides policy that protects significant woodlands in certain areas of the province, those being ecoregions 6E and 7E. All of Muskoka, including the subject property, is located in ecoregion 5E, so is not the subject of these enhanced protection policies. The letter of objection further suggests that the proposed development is similar to that of another development in Huntsville, which saw the clear cutting of a similar large property in a prominent location. To that, I reiterate that the development this application is seeking approval for is for one single family dwelling and associated accessory structures. It is the desire of the property owner to in fact maintain privacy, that is the trees, and to not clear cut the lot. The only trees that would be removed would be for structures that comply with all zoning provisions, including lot coverage and setbacks from all property lines. I will note that in addition to meeting the town's environmental goals, the proposed is also consistent with the town's goals for economic resiliency and will result in the property being made available to be responsibly developed, that is, with a single family dwelling with appropriate development constraints. Respectfully, Mr. Mound's request to delay the proposed rezoning application until a tree preservation bylaw is enacted is, in my opinion, an inappropriate approach to development and specifically not applicable to this application. Respectfully, if we were to wait for a tree preservation bylaw to be enacted, all development in the town of Huntsville would be on hold. In fact, I commend staff on their attention to detail respecting the environmental mapping and policy review that went into this application to ensure the development proposed is appropriate, responsible for the property, and supported by staff. It is further my opinion the proposed reflects responsible, good development for the subject property that is in character with the surrounding property's uses and is significantly less dense than that of the development in the Woodland Heights neighborhood. As such, we respectfully ask that the committee agrees that the proposed reflects good planning, that the application be approved as set out. Thank you, and I'm available to answer any questions you might have on this particular application.
Thank you for that, Helena. And I should say welcome. I think this is the first time you've appeared before our committee.
Yes, I think so.
So thank you for that. And I, at this point, I think if you can stay in, that would be great. We won't.
Sure, no problem.
And, but we might turn your video off, I think. And at this point, I would ask if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this application.
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 if they are connected by telephone to indicate that they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcock, I can confirm there are no hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much for that. At this point then, I do have a motion that I will display on the screen. And so before I turn to committee for questions, I'll just read the motion as presented. It is moved by Councillor Armour. I was supposed to give Julie 30 seconds and I haven't done that. So I'll read slowly for the first. There it goes. Okay. It is moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z24-2020 HT, changing the zoning on the lot from a conservation zone to a conservation zone with an exception to require the maintenance of the existing natural vegetation and to prohibit the removal of trees between April 16th to October 14th, and to a rural residential zone with an exception to recognize the existing lot frontage as meeting the requirements of section 3.3 of the zoning bylaw and to prohibit the removal of trees between April 16th to October 14th. So with that, I will turn it to committee to see if there are any questions or comments. Yes, Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I've got a couple, so I'll start at the start. How about that?
Sure.
So just for clarity, the owner of this property had the property rezoned to conservation at a previous date. Do we know what that date was? I read it somewhere, but I've lost it.
Curtis? Curtis, you're on mute.
Mute.
My apologies, Madam Chair, through you.
No worries.
The subject property was created for consent in 2002, and it was at the same time that it was rezoned to from a rural one and a rural residential zone to an open space zone with an exception to prohibit development. And that exception was intended to act as a holding zone for future development. But I just wanted to clarify that I don't believe it was the present owner that had done this. It was a previous owner, and they have since sold the land to the present owner.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wiebe?
I'll get back to you. Can I just take a moment and I'll come back with other questions?
Sure. Sure. Yep. Are there any other questions? Yes, Mayor Terziano.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. Just actually further to Councillor Wiebe's question, when it was rezoned open space, was it our bylaw of 2006 or 8 that actually changed it to conservation?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So at the time it was rezoned in 2002, again, was open space, which was an O1 zone with an exception to prohibit development. And then in 2008, planning staff through the comprehensive update changed it to conservation. And it was likely because that specific zone, that O1 zone, was transitioned into a different type of open space zone. So I'm assuming it was just, it wasn't a 1-for-1, so they decided it would be best to just make it conservation.
Similar to the island on La Ciosa, I think, probably. Okay, thank you.
Chair, that's correct.
Yes, Councillor Wiebe?
Sure, thanks. Could the agent for the owner, could you outline, because I didn't find it in any of the material, the size of the building envelope, that's to say what the proposed clearing would be, what it would look like?
So I can't say specifically the exact size of the building envelope, but it is everything that is not encompassed by the this 30-meter stream setback on either side of the stream, as well as the side and rear yard and front yard setbacks. Does that answer your question?
Councillor Wiebe?
So that's to say then that as it stands with our current bylaw, they could cut everything up to those points if they so chose.
Curtis?
Through you, Madam Chair. Technically, there's no tree clearing bylaw. We are putting protections in place to protect the conservation, the proposed conservation zone abutting the stream, but there would technically be no no other requirements to maintain vegetation. I would say though that it is a pretty significant area and it is a minor use. But if committee feels strongly that additional protections are required, committee could propose an amendment to impose something like site plan control to require additional vegetation retention. But again, it is a very minor use and a very big lot.
Councillor Weed.
Thank you. So I guess that, but I think that's the point. That's the thrust of the letter from Ross Mond, which states that as it stands, we actually don't have anything in place. And without a site plan, without something on paper to approve, we're not actually approving anything. We're saying, hope this goes well. And from my perspective, that I don't want to be part of a decision-making body that says, I hope this goes well, but we didn't put anything in place to make sure. And for all intents and purposes, the owner of this lot may do exactly what a good steward of conservation land would do in this type of scenario, but I don't know that. And I'm not comfortable approving it without more information. I think if a single residence is proposed and they know what they want to build, I think that we should probably have a sense for what that is. If not, that means they're not prepared for it. That's my opinion on it.
If I may, just before I go to you, Helene, it seems, to your point, a bit wide open. And especially when you look at it and it refers to prohibit the removal of trees, but between a certain time, which would imply that outside of that time, we're saying, okay, go ahead, do whatever. And that's sort of my interpretation as well. So I know, Helena, you wanted to respond to that, and then I'll go to Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to repeat what Curtis said just about the existing conservation zone, and that it doesn't actually prohibit tree removal itself. So as for the existing zone, the entire property could be cleared itself. And I know that the owner of the subject property is listening in on the meeting as well. So if it would put your minds at ease a little bit more to hear directly from them how they wish to develop the property, specifically with a single family dwelling, then that's an option as well.
I appreciate that, and I can let Councillor Weed respond to that. I noticed he had his hand up, but my guess is that it's lovely that they are listening, but sometimes it's nice to actually see it on paper what it might look like. But Councillor Curtis, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Woodland Heights subdivision has sort of general protections in place. So that whole subdivision is subject to site plan, and their general rules are, you're permitted a building envelope and a yard, but we generally require the majority of vegetation to be retained. And we implement that through site plan control. What I'm hearing from the committee is that we want further protections on to prohibit tree clearing. So that is certainly an option. Committee could amend or could recommend an amended resolution to include site plan and require that the majority of vegetation be retained outside the building envelopes. Alternatively, another solution would be to potentially impose basically yard restrictions, greater yard restrictions with vegetation retention if there's a specific yard that committee is concerned about. But what I'm hearing is that committee is concerned generally with tree clearing over the entirety of the property. So that's, I just want to make committee aware of their options.
They both sound like reasonable options, actually. If one sort of mirrors what's happening in Woodland Heights, that would seem not so bad. Just Councillor Weeb, do you want to comment on those options?
Thank you. I guess that's where I'm going. I don't know. I haven't heard from the rest of the committee. I don't know if they feel as strongly as I do about it. I certainly, I'm one member, one vote, and I'm not prepared to vote for it at this time. But certainly it's this is why we're here.
So we have the possibility of two options where we could amend the existing motion that would do much of what Curtis just talked about. And I noticed the mayor had her hand up, but so did Councillor Armour. So I'm going to Councillor Armour first.
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I'm just curious if the applicant could, if we could table something that doesn't have the applicant come back next month with a better perspective on what he's planning on doing with the property and the building envelope. I'm glad to hear it falls under the Woodland Heights conservation or tree cutting area, but I think we just need a little bit more option, because right now it looks like that in the winter months, he could go in there, possibly log the property with the way that's bylaws passed or written right now.
Okay, Curtis, could you respond to that? Because I didn't think that it was covered by the Woodland Heights, but you were saying that they have something like that, right?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Alcock. The lot presently isn't under the same sort of tree clearing restrictions,
Right.
Councilmember, but we could make it subject to similar rules.
Right.
And committee could also impose, together with that restriction on site plan and you know, a general sort of prohibition on tree clearing outside of the building envelope, committee could impose a further rule that suggested no site alteration prior to a site plan being approved. So that way we have assurances that an application for site plan would be submitted. Staff would have a chance to vet the application, establish where the tree clearing will occur, and have the application be approved. And that would allow the application potentially to be approved today. But again, just to provide committee their options.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Terziano?
Thank you, Chair. Couple questions. First off, as the property is zoned now, are they prohibited from removing any trees right now?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, there would be no prohibition on removing any trees. They could technically, I suppose, clear cut it.
So nothing we do today is actually giving them more permissions to cut down trees.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. And just to add to that, Madam Chair, the proposal would include sort of a large conservation zone with restrictions on tree clearing around the sensitive features.
That's on today's application.
On
That's
today's
what it would do. Yeah. So in fact, it would add prohibitions for tree clearing.
It would be.
I, for one, would like to hear from the applicant if they're here
Mhm.
in our waiting room. Just
Okay.
exactly what their intent is. I have no reason to doubt what they have to say, but if I can't hear what they have to say, I have no idea. So I'd like to hear them.
All right. So can I ask, Crystal, could you bring in the applicant?
Yes, if I could ask them to raise their hand, as I can't tell by the names that are there. Oh, I see. Here they are.
Perfect. Thank you. I didn't mean to ignore the applicant. I was just thinking that from what I was hearing, that sometimes it's helpful to actually see it. But I'm glad we're bringing in the applicant.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you guys can see me.
We can't see you, but we can hear you. Oh, we
All
can
right,
see you
there we
now.
go. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for hearing me out. So as the owners of the land, our objective is to build a single family dwelling. Obviously, with intention to build a single family dwelling, we as a family would want privacy as well. And with 24 acres of land that we do have available, our intention is to obviously cut as little trees as possible in order to have privacy on all sides of the actual development itself. So our intentions, we're not businessmen or anything like that. Our intention is to build a single family dwelling that's going to be enjoyed strictly for our family. That's why we wanted to respect all the neighbors, nature preservation, and obviously all your recommendations and your opinions as well.
Thank you very much for that. Are there questions from committee with respect to that? Your worship?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dennis. So there's no plans for future development. There's no plans to subdivide further at any
Absolutely
time right now.
No, absolutely not. We are only building one single family dwelling. We actually, the reason we bought the piece of property that big is because we enjoy privacy as a family. So this is not a business decision at all. This is strictly for family purpose.
If the map were up of your property, could you identify the building site that you're proposing to build on right now or not?
Yes, absolutely. I believe we actually submitted that. If Helena can jump in and just hear me out, but I can definitely show it for you.
We can ask, Julie, can you put that up? Oh, on our screen? Sorry, Curtis. Can you, you're on mute.
Thank
There.
you. Through you, Madam Chair, if you'd wish, I could put it up on the screen.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Through you, Madam Chair, can you see the map I'm sharing?
Yes.
And I'll turn on the air photo so it's more visible. So, and through you, Madam Chair, I apologize for speaking out of turn, but this is the subject lot here.
Okay.
It's a large lot.
And perhaps, Dennis, are you still with us? Can you point out?
Yes, I can. Am I able to? So you see my mouse here on the right-hand side?
Yes.
Okay, so the property would be right here, somewhere around there.
It's underneath. Oh yeah, I see.
Right. See, I'm just moving my mouse right now, right about here. So we want to respect privacy to this property and then all these other properties as well. So somewhere around here.
I've lost your mouse, but maybe others can see it. I don't know. Anyway, I had the idea in the beginning. It's right sort of in the center. Oops. Curtis?
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair.
Can you just show us once again where the building site is?
I'm concerned that the committee may have been seeing my mouse on the screen and
Yes.
potentially not Mr. Snazdanovic's mouse. Perhaps we could ask Mr. Snazdanovic just to maybe give us a verbal description of where the building envelope would be.
So let me try to explain this. So Curtis, where your mouth is, just go down and to the left inside the screen, right about there, right there. So we want to respect the privacy of all the neighbors. That's why we wanted to build it right there.
So in doing that, you don't see that you're having to remove a lot of trees because it's such a large lot, right?
No, we don't. Another thing that I just wanted to mention is where the actual entrance to the property is from the main road, from Canal Road. It's an old road that was already there. So most of the trees are already cut down from there because it's an old bed road, like from 30, 40 years ago. So in order to actually get to this lot here, we wouldn't even have to cut a lot of trees to build the actual road itself.
Okay. So Mayor Terziano, would you, do you have a follow-up with respect to that? You had asked.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't actually. I was just trying to get an idea of where the building envelope would be. I actually don't have any problem at all with this application.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And maybe we could take it down now. I think everybody else has asked. Any further comments before I send Dennis away? Questions of him? I don't see any. Oh, sorry, Mayor Terziano.
I would just say that maybe for everybody's comfort level, if as Curtis identified, we could put site plan control on it, that might make the committee more comfortable. But
I certainly think that that's not a bad idea because I haven't heard the applicant or the applicant's representative suggest otherwise. That I think if we did that, you'd be comfortable with that, right? Yes. Okay. I'm
Yes,
seeing
we
not.
open a site plan control.
Perfect. And Councillor Wiebe?
Thank you, Chair Alcock. I would feel a little more comfortable with it. As much as, no offense intended, I think that we can't govern on handshakes and goodwill. It just doesn't work that way. Not for me, it doesn't. So I'd like to see something on paper as part of the application.
So the site plan control would be helpful. So maybe we're amending this motion. Do I have someone who would move that amendment okay. Both Councillor Armour followed by the mayor. We have a motion prepared. See what happens around here. We're putting it on the screen. And the mover will be Councillor Armour and seconder will be Mayor Terziano. Okay. It is recommended, I have the move by Councillor Armour, seconded by Mayor Terziano. It is recommended that the following paragraph be inserted, and further that the property be subject to site plan approval pursuant to section 41 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, as amended, pursuant to section 41 of the planning. We'll cut that piece out. And that no site alteration is permitted until a site plan agreement has been registered on title. Any questions or comments about that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Perfect. Thank you. And so we will have a revised motion. Moved by Councillor Armour, seconded by Mayor Terziano. It is recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 24/2020 HTE, changing the zoning on the lot from a conservation zone to a conservation zone, with an exception to require the maintenance of the existing natural vegetation and to prohibit the removal of trees between April 16th to October 14th, and to a rural residential zone with an exception to recognize the existing lot frontage as meeting the requirements of section 3.3 of the zoning bylaw, and to prohibit the removal of trees between April 16th to October 14th. And further that the property be subject to site plan approval pursuant to section 41 of the Planning Act, RSO, as amended, and that no site alteration is permitted until a site plan agreement has been registered on title. Any questions or comments about the revised motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. There we go. I think it did. Councillor Fitzgerald, you have your hand up. Did I miss that, or is that? So you were just voting. Okay, thank you. All right. All right, then we've dealt with that. And I want to say thank you to both Dennis and to Helena for being here and presenting it, and for staying with us as we discussed that. That was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so while we move you two out, we're back to you, Curtis, with Z 29/2020 HD Coker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject property is located at 12 River House Lane. The lot is designated waterfront and rural, and zoned rural 2 and shoreline residential 3 with exception 0, 1, 2, 3. The purpose and effect of this application is to rezone a portion of the lands from a rural 2 zone to a rural 2 zone with an exception to permit a hobby farm as an additional permitted use. Additional accessory use. The amendment would allow the applicant to house their horses on the lot. Generally, those lands that are within 150 meters of the water are deemed waterfront. The plan also requires that the physical relationship of the lands be evaluated to determine if they functionally relate to the waterfront area. In this case, the lot is relatively flat sloping downwards towards the river within 30 meters of the shoreline. Due to the topography of the lot, the river is not visible from the majority of the lot. Further, as the drainage courses on site appear to flow intermittently, the lands beyond the 150 meter, or sorry, the lands beyond 150 meters from the river would not appear to functionally relate to the water. The official plan encourages new agricultural uses within the rural area to ensure the proposed use remains compatible with surrounding shoreline residential uses. The use would only be permitted beyond 150 meters from the shoreline. As the lands contained streams that bisect the lot, a scoped environmental study was completed by FRI Ecological Services in support of the application. The author characterized the streams as drainage swales and included a recommendation to implement a 10-meter vegetation buffer abutting each feature. The report concluded by stating that the proposed hobby farm, including the barn and paddock, would not impact the environmental integrity of the lot or the Muskoka River, subject to the implementation of the 10-meter vegetation buffer recommendation. As a portion of the lot is, as a portion of the lot is considered waterfront, all development will be subject to site plan control to implement the conclusions and recommendations of the Scope EIS. The application was circulated in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. No objections have been received. The application appears to conform to the policies of the official plan and provincial policy statement, and therefore staff are recommending approval.
Thank you, Curtis. I would now call upon the applicant or their representative to provide any additional comments.
The applicant or their representative are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 if you are connected by phone to indicate they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcock, I do see one hand raised.
Thank you. Okay, I can see you.
I had a catastrophe. It fell off before, so I was trying to put it back to where it was.
Oh man, don't you love Zoom? This is so
Oh
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
All right.
great. Yeah. Good afternoon, Chair Alcock, Planning Committee, Lanny Dennis, Wayne Simpson and Associates. Represent the owners of the property. I think that's a fair and accurate assessment presented by Curtis. I appreciate working with the town staff and the efforts moving the application forward, and concur with the planning department to approve the application. I think by and large, it's fairly straightforward. It's to permit a hobby farm as an accessory use, be 500 feet back from the water course, and it's to accommodate 2 or 3 horses that the owners have. It seems to make sense outside of the waterfront residential zone. It is zoned rural. Rural does permit an agricultural use, but for some reason it doesn't permit a hobby farm. The lot itself is 9 hectares in size, and 4 hectares would be a rural lot size. So I think it's plenty large enough. The lot itself also has some hay fields that the horses can utilize for pasturing. And the barn itself, or the horse area where they'd house the horses, is about 1,000 square feet in size. The ecological report was done, which added some further protection to the drainage courses or swales running across the property. The lands would be subject to site plan control. So I think it's a fairly benign use overall, given the protection on the site and the distance from the shoreline. So I'd respectfully request Planning Committee make a recommendation to Council that they approve the zoning amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. If you wouldn't mind, Lanny, we're going to keep you in. We'll turn your video off so that you can be there when committee might have questions. All right. And at this point, I will ask if there's any member from the public who would like to speak to this application?
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 if they are connected by phone to indicate they would like to address committee. And Chair Alcock, I can confirm there are no hands raised.
Thank you very much for that. So at this point, then I will put the motion on the screen and quickly read it before I turn it to committee for questions. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Stone and seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that Planning Committee approve zoning bylaw amendment Z 29/2020 HT, changing the zoning from a rural 2 zone to a rural 2 zone with an exception. 2, permit a hobby farm as an additional permitted accessory use, require the use of erosion and sediment controls during all construction activities, prohibit the pasturing of animals within 10 meters of the drainage courses or within 150 meters of the shoreline, and require the maintenance of a 10-meter natural vegetative buffer from all drainage courses. So with that, I will ask committee if you have any questions, comments regarding this application. I don't see any. Okay, with that, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Lanny, I think Crystal will let you out now before we move to the next one. Okay, perfect. So again, Curtis, over to you with your final application this morning, Z27/2020 THE Camp Minneowi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject property is located at 600 Evergreen Trail. The lot is designated waterfront and rural and zoned institutional camp with exception 0660 and rural 2, as well as a bit of natural resource. The purpose and effect of these applications is to rezone a portion of the lands from an institutional tourist camp zone to an institutional tourist camp zone and shoreline residential 2 zone to permit the creation of 4 shoreline residential lots. Each of the severed lots would have a minimum area of 1 hectare and 60 meters of frontage on Mary Lake. The retained lot is presently vacant and would have an area of 31 hectares and 30 meters of frontage on Mary Lake. The official plan states that the preservation of the tourist commercial land base fronting on water is essential to the long-term health of the tourism industry in Huntsville. A planning justification report was submitted which characterized the lands as surplus to the camp's needs, stating that since the 1990s, all core programs have been conducted from the main site location across the lake at 1878 Muskoka Road 10. The report further clarified that the camp has continued to expand and has ample room for future growth, and that the sale of these lands would not result in staff downsizing. Regarding the proposed residential lots, the official plan states that new waterfront residential lots will have at least 1 hectare with a minimum of 60 meters of shoreline frontage and have regard for environmental constraints. In this case, the proposed lots meet these requirements. An environmental impact assessment was submitted in support of the application. The study evaluated the suitability of the lots for development and included a review of the natural heritage features on site, fish habitat, as well as potential habitat for species at risk. The study identified potential habitat for bats on the retained lands, potential blanding turtle habitat at the rear of the proposed severed lands, as well as through the retained lands, and determined the entire shoreline is most appropriately considered type 2 fish habitat. The study concluded that development of the proposed shoreline lots could occur without impacting the identified habitat, subject to the careful implementation of conditions. These include no vegetation removal on areas, excuse me, let me start that over. Note vegetation removal on areas of the retained land identified as bat habitat and provides us a timing window. That all development be set back 30 meters from the eco sites with a naturally vegetated buffer being retained within this setback. General site clearing across the entire lot, and again, providing us with a timing window. That all development be set back 20 meters from the shoreline of Mary Lake. And this would obviously not include shoreline structures such as a dock, but otherwise that would be a general prohibition. To the use of erosion and sediment control during construction, the delineation and isolation of natural heritage features, which would be completed prior to construction activities occurring, and the temporary storage of excess materials during construction being located at least 30 meters from the shoreline and natural heritage features. These recommendations would be implemented through a 5126 agreement with the town and registered on title of each lot. Further site plan control will be utilized to implement these recommendations and ensure natural vegetation is substantially retained on each lot. Regarding the retained lands, the official plan identifies criteria to govern redevelopment of existing waterfront commercial uses. These criteria include the location, size, characteristics, and capacity of the property being addressed. Any increased density of development or intensity of use must be appropriate for the site. Adequate access and services, including water supply and waste disposal, being made available, and compatibility with surrounding properties being addressed. In this case, additional information regarding the camp's future plans for this lot and how the policies of the official plan would be addressed will be required prior to the application coming back before committee for consideration. The applicant is proposing to access the lots via Evergreen Trail, which is a private road. However, this means of access and the camp's right to use it are currently disputed by at least one property owner, as noted in the numerous letters of objection that we received in response to the circulation of the application. As an alternative, the applicant has proposed to access the lots via Fitzgerald Drive. However, a review of the aerial photography and constraint mapping has revealed steep slopes. Should the applicant wish to proceed with this access, additional information should be provided detailing the exact location of the access, as well as information to determine the feasibility of the route. Additionally, as this private right-of-way would be constructed over a non-maintained public road and an unopened road allowance, the town's operations department would need to review this amended proposal. The applications were circulated to the Mary Lake Association in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. To date, 11 letters of objection and 2 professional planning opinions have been received from abutting owners raising concerns with the proposed access over Evergreen Trail, construction-related disruptions, the future use of the camp lands, the use of Fitzgerald Drive for access, and protection of the natural environment. The Mary Lake Association provided a letter of objection requesting that the number of proposed lots be reduced from 4 to 3 and to implement specific environmental controls to protect the shoreline. District staff have reviewed the proposal and noted that the frontage of the proposed lots must be amended to have a minimum of 60 meters of shoreline frontage, and that a cultural heritage resource assessment should be submitted to the satisfaction of the Minister of Tourism, Culture, and Sport. As a result of the issues surrounding the proposed access and the frontage of the retained lands, staff have brought the application forward for information only. The application will not come forward to committee for further consideration until the proposal has been revised to address these concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Curtis. At this point, I will call upon the applicant or their representative to speak to this application.
The applicant or the representative are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 if you are connected by phone to indicate that you would like to address committee. And Chair Alcock, I do see one hand raised. A reminder to please have your microphone and video if possible turned on before you begin speaking, and to confirm your name and mailing address.
Hello, my name is Rich Birch from Camp Minyoe, 1878 Muskoka Road 10, Port Sydney, Ontario. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mayor, members of council. I'm actually going to also request 2 other members of our team they're going to speak to some details on this as well. So they may raise their hand and jump in on this conversation. My role is the executive director at Camp Minneoy, and we're so thankful to get a chance to speak today to our desire to sever a series of lots on property that we've owned since 1959 at 600 Evergreen Trail. We understand through this process that there might be some concern around this, and we want to ensure that we obviously want to work with the town and with our neighbors to find us a solution to move forward. We aren't going anywhere where our interests are definitely aligned with other landowners on Mary Lake particularly. We've attempted to follow the town's public engagement process. This includes obviously the standard work of posting public signs, ensuring letters, and responding to any inbound communication. On top of that, we've attended the Evergreen Trail Road Association meeting in August and actually communicated our intentions at that point, even before we actually talked with our own constituency and alumni about this transaction. We reached out to the Mary Lake Association this week in response to their communication, and we've had a great follow-up. I had one great follow-up conversation. Look forward to more conversation with them even later this week. Today, I just want to start with give you a little bit of background on what brings us to this spot, why we're even here today. We purchased this land in 1959 and have been operating it continuously since then. On May 19th this year, 2020, the Ontario provincial government closed overnight children's camps like Camp Minneoy. This put an incredible burden on operations like ours. In fact, in a recent study of camps in Ontario, 92% are requiring financial support because of the impact of being closed by the provincial government. Furthermore, without any support, 33% of camps believe that they will go bankrupt before the end of 2020. A further 59% believe that they'll go bankrupt if they don't receive financial support by the end of 2021. We're so thankful that neither of those numbers apply to us. This extraordinary action taken by the provincial government has brought us to the point where we need to explore our options around selling these lots at 600 Evergreen Trail. We aren't requesting any variances in the severance process. We believe that our application is well within the bounds of what's been done within the town on similar lands, even on Mary Lake. We really believe that there are 5 items of weight that have been expressed that we are in the process of addressing, and we want to take just a few minutes to talk about those now. The first 3 are the use of retained lands, the frontage of retained lands, the need for an archaeological study. I'll be speaking quickly to those. Next, I've asked Lanny Dennis, our planner, to speak on the composition of the lots. And then finally, Graham Knight, our lawyer, he'll be speaking on the right-of-way access issue. So first, use of retained lands. We've received multiple phone calls from neighbors about our intended use of the retained lands here. We'll just respond publicly how we've responded to them privately. With this severance, we are focusing our development for the foreseeable future on our property on the other side of the lake at 1878 Muskoka Road 10. We anticipate little use of the retained land with the exception of an occasional cookout with a small group of campers during the summer months. As an example, a small dock to accommodate a few canoes and a natural campsite with a fire pit area, that sort of thing. We value that the retained lands will remain as a natural state as possible, as we can see for future, imagined use. Second issue, frontage of retained lands. We have clearly heard through this process that our neighbors and friends would prefer the lake frontage of the retained lands be this 200 feet rather than the 100 feet that we're allowed. We'll gladly adjust our plans so the frontage of retained lands will be at the 200-foot mark. Finally, the need for an archaeological study. We received this report late last Friday. This is the first time that we heard of this need from the District of Muskoka. And we've moved already on this week to secure this study, to have that service done as quickly as possible so that we can submit that. I'm going to ask Lanny Dennis if he could raise his hand. He's going to speak for just a few minutes around the actual nature of the severances that we're asking. And then after that, Graham Knight, we'll just go right into him speaking about the right-of-way. So I think Lanny should be there.
Thank you. I believe Krista will be bringing him back. You're back.
Yeah, good afternoon again. Just very quickly, I think I'll just, based on the time constraints that we have, I just want to touch base quickly on the down zoning. Policies in the local official plan speak to extenuating circumstances, and I think a pandemic that has closed, the province has mandated the closure of the camps, creates a significant and severe financial hardship for many camps, and certainly throws them into a negative revenue stream. The down zoning of Northwoods is it only represents 4% of the overall revenue. There's no core programs. There's 96% of the campers are located on the main camp on the south side of Mary Lake. There's no job loss. There's about 20 full-time employees, 200 seasonal employees, and this with the sale of the lots will help the camp achieve anticipated growth, the continued growth over the next few years, so they can provide more jobs. The 200 campers that come, they bring their families, they come up to stay and eat in Huntsville. You have that spin-off spending, and all this to say that you know, while it's a down zoning, it props up what can happen on the south side, the main camp of Camp Minne-Owie. And I think it's an important contribution to the tourism base. It's the economic lifeline of Huntsville and the district of Muskoka, and those policies are entrenched in the official plans. With respect to the waterfront residential building lots, the lots would comply with the 200 feet frontage, 2.5 acres under the proposed SR2 zoning. There doesn't appear to be in question. They don't appear to be in question. They do have the ample size in the planning report, and I certainly would concur that there is ample area to build to construct a cottage, a septic system, parking area, and shoreline, reasonable shoreline structures. Except of course for the access, which will be addressed, and the archaeological study. Interestingly enough, if it was a 3-in-1 scenario, an archaeological study probably wouldn't be required. Anyways, the idea was that introducing a freehold lineal lot adjacent those same or similar type lots immediately to the west, sort of felt that would lessen or reduce the impact for those neighbors immediately to the west. I can certainly concur with the planning department that you know, the mitigation measures recommended in the ecological report be included in agreements, and of course these lots are subject to site plan control. The retained lot at the offset outside of the process, the idea was to trying to provide a balance between maintaining some of the commercial component, but at the same time minimizing the impact along the shoreline and the neighbors. The idea was it's a smaller area that would be zoned for the tourist commercial, therefore it would be a smaller operation. And you know, in fact, the utility of the land has probably decreased 4/5. The idea was, you know, at that location on the east side, there's a road allowance that runs up that side as well, which offers additional buffering from any camp activities from the people immediately to the east. And as noted by the camp, certainly the lots will be adjusted to ensure that there's 60 meters or 200 feet on each of the properties. Anyways, that would conclude what I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. And you have one more that will be.
Yeah, one more presenter, Graham Knight. He should be here as well.
Okay.
Good afternoon, folks. My name's Graham Knight. I work at Barriston Law. We are at 151 Ferris Lane, Suite 202 in Barrie. And the postal code is Larry 4 Martin, 5 Charlie 1. My comments are only directed toward the road. Maybe 3-4 weeks ago, I spoke to Mr. Birch, who brought me up to speed with what the camp was planning. And he noted that there may be a question as to the ingress and egress from the camp. We undertook a full title search to try to sort this out. Minioi purchased the property in 1959 and had access rights. Now somehow, and I can't explain to you how, but over time, that right-of-way privilege right in the documents has disappeared. Having done real estate for some time, that could be because someone inadvertently left it off a document. It could also be that in the recording of the documents in the registry office, or now TerraView, the right-of-way particulars were left off. I don't know. At any rate, I asked who was the person raising the concern. I understood their name to be Snell, and we were able to determine that Andrew Timosewicz acted for the Snells. So in order to move this along, on October 23, I sent Mr. Timosewicz our whole title search with like 10 enclosures, our plans, deeds, everything, to say, here's what we've been able to find out. And there's a meeting on the 11th, and can we talk about this beforehand? Having not heard from him, I followed up on November 2nd, and I still haven't had any word back. So I'm not clear on if there's an objection. Nobody's come to me and said because these exact things. Now, turning from the legal stuff to user rights, we have a property that Minioi has been using for 61 years without objection. And we also have a situation where we have a road association. I understand the families pay $400 a year to maintain the road, and the Minioi pays $800 a year to maintain the road. So in a nutshell, I am not able to determine why in 61 years we haven't had objections about ingress and egress, and why an association would be taking money from people to maintain a road who allege they have no business being there. So I would have hoped to have been able to come to a conclusion with some of the objectors, lawyers, or Mr. Timosewicz by today, but I haven't, and that's the best we've got. I think Minioi, if push came to shove after 60 years, is going to have a very strong position in terms of user rights.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Graham. I appreciate that. So just in conclusion, our interests are aligned with the town. We want Mary Lake to be an incredible resource. We're not going anywhere. We believe that we're proposing a reasonable development option. We believe that this is the highest and best use considered all the situation we find ourselves in. We did consider other commercial applications for this land. And frankly, we think cottage lots would be the best for our neighbors on the road, for our friends on the lake. We think it's the best move forward. We see this as the path forward after being closed by the Ontario provincial government, ironically still closed by the Ontario provincial government. And we're thankful for this opportunity that frankly other similar organizations don't have. And so we're happy to be here, happy to continue to engage with the town through this process. Thank you.
Okay, I want to say thank you to all three of you, and we'll keep you in the picture. We'll remove the picture, thank you, but we will keep you present. I just remind everybody that today we don't have a motion attached with this. This is not a decision. This is a for information only item, and so that's why it's great having all of this input, and everybody will be able to consider all of the comments that have been made so far. So at this point, I will ask if there are members of the public, and I know that there are, so that would like to speak to this application. And I will ask Crystal to take the process from here.
Members of the public are reminded to use the raise hand button or press *9 if they are connected by phone to indicate that they would like to address committee. So Chair Alcock, as of right now, I do see 4 hands raised, and with your permission, I will start working through the speakers list from the top down, bringing them in one at a time.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. Welcome, John.
Thank you. John P. Gallagher, 24 Hibbard Road, Huntsville, P1H, 1C9. I've been retained by Doug and Patricia Snell, who opposed the noted applications for severance and rezoning. They own the 85 acres directly to the west of the subject lands, and that also includes the Evergreen Trail. It is the Snell's position that there should be no mention of access over their lands to serve Camp Minneowi as a means of access to the site. And there's no interest from the Snells to permit additional access over their lands. They became aware of this proposal last fall and had to pay to seek legal advice. And their lawyer reviewed the documents, and in his opinion, the camp did not have the legal right to cross the Snell's lands along Evergreen Trail. We provided a letter to that effect, and you should have a copy of that. Also, the consent applications have identified rights of ways across each of the lots to the Evergreen Trail. It does not abut a year-round municipal road, and there's no condominium road for the site. This would leave access by water or from the East Fitzgerald Road. If the first means of access would be from the water, then the rights of way across each of the lots should be removed from the application and the sketch, and any mention of access granting rights of way should be removed from the sketch as well. The new application should provide additional information with respect to conformity with the official plan as it relates to water access under C7222-30. No plans have been submitted with the water access, but it was mentioned in the notice. So therefore we can't make a judgment on whether it is or isn't water access. When we looked into it, we were then advised that they would be accessing from Fitzgerald Drive to the east. And it does appear that there are steep slopes in the area of the proposed access. And that portion of Fitzgerald is a seasonally maintained road. There would also be a requirement to cross the road allowance once you get to the property. If it is from Fitzgerald, then there should be no right-of-way through the most westerly residential lot so as not to create a potential shortcut between Fitzgerald and Evergreen Trail. The access issue would not deal with the potential for trespass on my client's land. They're concerned that construction vehicles would use and impact the road with damage. It would also be a concern that they have to constantly police the access so that only those permitted to use it would. If the severances are approved, there should be a 5126 agreement registered on title stating that the access for the lots will not be from Evergreen Trail. By having that on title, anyone purchasing the lots for a new cottage will know up front. One of the issues that we had concern with and haven't seen how it would be addressed is that the proposal for the retained lot only has half the required frontage at 30 meters. And that being said, the lots currently are fairly narrow as you move back. The only reason they seem to get their large frontages because they're on angles to the water. And a reduction in this commercial zoning will also reduce the area that is zoned. And it's being significantly downsized. And the zoning, I believe on that is institutional camp zoning with a site-specific 660 exception. And so there's about 13.7 acres currently zoned. And with the proposal here, it would leave about 1.1 acres for the same camp use. That strip of 30 meters that would be retained would have to place 8 accommodation units, septic system, and each of those accommodation units has the right to allow 7 persons within that. And there's no plan to show how that will look in the overall development of these lands. As you move towards the back, you have wetlands that have been identified and again, steep slopes on the lot. Given the new lots would be SR2, there's also a 12-meter westerly side yard setback from those for the camp units, accommodation units, and it would hamper the location on the retained strip. And it would also likely lead to compatibility issues between the residential and camp use. A thorough review of sections C119, C7 3.6, C7 4.4, and C7 4.5 would need to be undertaken. There's been no zoning amendment to increase the retained backlands for the CS3 660 use. And given the backland, there's also a need to protect those buffers and wetlands through zoning. A comprehensive plan should be prepared for the balance of the lands to determine conformity with the official plan and zoning bylaw prior to dealing with the applications. In my professional opinion, there's a number of outstanding issues that would need to be resolved accurately. Review the severance potential and associated zoning bylaw amendment. The application is premature and new applications should be submitted on the actual basis of access, legal rights of ways, lot configuration, and zone conformity. Any future consent should be subject to a full public meeting. My clients have advised me that if their solicitor wants to speak with them, they're more than willing. But obviously, you see, their plans are costing my clients money to defend their position through their solicitor. And again, we would reiterate that we are opposed to the application, and we would look forward to a new submission together with the associated reports. Also, as a side note, I am here for the Lionston Holdings, so if you do have questions for the next file, I will be around. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, John. I believe Crystal will send you back, and we have 3 more people who would like to speak to this. I can start timing. Oh, sorry, Anne, you're on mute. There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ann Rozalowski. I live at 591 Evergreen Trail. Probably the closest proximity to the camp is my property. I did submit a letter of objection, so I only want to add one more additional note. Is Graham still there listening?
Yes.
He did speak to the right-of-way on the Snells. However, in 1996, I also have a right-of-way that is separate from the Snell property. So the Snell right-of-way ends adjacent to 2 cottages over. So there are 2 rights-of-way that need to be addressed. And I take the same position. I will not grant access over my rights-of-way.
Okay, thank you for that, Anne. And that's in addition to.
So I don't.
That information.
Yeah, Graham. Graham did not mention that. He focused on the rights of way of the Snells. My right of way is dated 1996.
Okay, so I'm assuming that Graham will take note of that, since he did speak to it. So thank you. And you did submit a letter as well, right?
I did, yes, and Curtis did talk about some of the issues that many of us have been opposed to. So there's no point in reiterating those.
I appreciate it, since we have more people who would like to speak.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So with that, we would ask that the third person who would like to come in, please come in. Crystal, will you be sending Anne back to the gallery? Not that we don't love having you, Anne. Okay, Mario.
Yes, hello.
Okay.
I want to say thank you to the Huntsville Planning Committee for allowing me to speak. My name is Mario Dorio. I'm speaking as a representative of the Evergreen Trail Road Association and the Evergreen Trail community. We are a community volunteer group comprised of residents on Evergreen Trail, chartered with maintaining the private road and addressing various issues surrounding ongoing usage of Evergreen Trail. I am president of the Road Association, but I'm also a resident, and my address is 667 Evergreen Trail. There are 15 properties in Evergreen Trail that are on Mary Lake that use Evergreen Trails for access. As mentioned, the access is over private lands, and each of the residents pays an annual fee to maintain the road. And the road is a single lane, can only handle pretty low speeds. I'd like to mention, though, that our Road Association and community has a long-standing relationship with Camp Minneowi, and it's been an integral part of our small community for many years. While it's not our intent to hinder Minneowi from raising needed funds, it is our intent to protect the integrity of Evergreen Trail, its community, and the green space around it. So with respect to the application, we do have some concerns. I don't want to reiterate ones that have already been mentioned, but may end up overlapping. So we're pretty proud of our trail. If I talk about road usage, the road itself is one of the best maintained private roads in the region. These 4 new lots will represent greater than a 25% increase in the number of cottagers using the road. That could potentially undermine the existing level of road quality. We would expect constant long-term construction traffic for the road extension and lot development. That could last several years due to the number of lots that are in the application. There'll be large trucks and heavy machinery with much more traffic volume on Evergreen Trail during construction. We fully expect damage and or deterioration of that road and the quality. And there is no doubt, also, there will be impeded access for residents as construction vehicles go back and forth. Our road is not only used for cars, but it also is a walking path for families with their children and dogs. With that in mind, we see in the application no consideration for road upkeep with the increased traffic and potential lots that are sold off and cottages built. No guarantee that new cottagers will contribute to the road maintenance moving forward, no guarantee of respect for the rules of the road, and no ability really to police or enforce usage as we currently do. There's also been mention of Fitzgerald Road being potentially used. We still have concerns if that is the access route. If you look at a sketch or a map, there will be effectively a Fitzgerald Road to Evergreen Trail thoroughfare created, where traffic will be greatly expanded. We'll have no control on traffic or who is accessing the road if that's the case. We cannot practically separate usage of these 2 roads if you look at how the lots are laid out. And this will create an untenable situation for our road and its residents. On the retained land usage, We did have a mention at the annual meeting from Camp Minneowi as to their looking into this redevelopment. Since our residents have a vested interest in the outcome of the application request, we'd like to be more actively consulted throughout the process. We have serious concerns over the retained lands and the potential future use of a backlot community, as we see in other parts of the lake. Although the camp is talking about the 4 lots now, our concern is, as if they need additional funds in the future, that additional rezoning of that backlot will move into like a backlot community. How do we ensure that these retained lands cannot be subdivided in the future? Ultimately, we need clarity on the intent of the retained lands and the small waterfront access parcel. We've talked about here it moving from 100 feet to 200 feet. The question that comes to me is, when you go to 200 feet, can you still support 4 lots with the remainder? I'm not sure. Our last concern is environmental. I think a number of people have put in their concerns on the environmental impact. We're definitely concerned over the destruction of forest lands, along with general loss of green space and wildlife habitats in the area. The camp is moving operations to a potentially environmentally sensitive area in the retained lands, and we'd like to ensure at a minimum the environmental recommendations from the environmental assessment and the Mary Lake Association submission to this committee are followed. That includes any site plan controls for the lots, so that mature protected trees are restricted from removal. Part of the environment in our mind is noise. The construction noise will last for several years as extension of lots are developed. There's going to be excavation, blasting potential given the rocky terrain, and there'll be excessive noise throughout the brief summer months when our cottagers are trying to enjoy the waterfront. This will greatly affect the quality of life in Evergreen Trail for a number of years. So I'd like to conclude that you can see from my points, we have several concerns on this application that need to be addressed. We'd like to and expect to be more active in part of the process moving forward, as our Evergreen Trail community has a lot at stake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario, for that. I noticed Councillor Stone had his hand up, and so Councillor Stone.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question, if I could, for Mr. Dorio. Has Camp Minneowi continued to pay their yearly maintenance fee for the road?
Yes, they have. So they as mentioned earlier, it's $400 per cottager. Camp Minneowi pays $800 because there's the potential for 56 people to be on that property.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And if other members of committee are okay, I wouldn't mind moving on. Thank you, Mario. We do have 3 more people who would like to speak to this application. So I believe Crystal will move you out, Mario, and we will go to our next speaker. Welcome.
Hello. Yes, can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Yes. Yes.
My name's Linda Kangas. I'm a member of the Mary Lake Association board, and I appreciate this opportunity to provide our perspective. My address is 230 Edgemere Road East in Port Sydney. So first, just a couple of comments I want to make up front. The Lake Association is very sensitive to the camp's financial challenges, and we most certainly recognize their right to monetize their surplus property. I'll also say up front that I have heard no complaints from any of our members opposing the converting the property to shoreline residential. In fact, it's very much in keeping with the surrounding area. So that general direction, we haven't heard a lot of objection to that. That said, there's a couple of areas of concern or question that have been raised by our members. And the first is environmental, I would say. The second is about the future of the remaining retained camp lands. And I frankly think Mario did a pretty good job of summarizing that concern. So perhaps I won't go over that again. I mean, there seems to be a concern about those retained lands being subdivided into backlots at some point and using the retained shoreline property as a communal access to the lake. And it's a model that exists at Griffin Bluffs and perhaps elsewhere on the lake. So people have seen that type of thing before. So that's one area of concern. But let me now turn my comments to the environment. So our focus is really on the shoreline buffer. And to the extent possible, we'd like to maximize the retention of existing vegetation in that area. So why do we care about that? Well, as everybody knows, the land in question slopes down to the lake, which makes it down to the water, which makes it susceptible to runoff that comes off of driveways and roofs and hard surfaces and lawns, for that matter, carrying pollutants into the lake. So a well-vegetated shoreline buffer is really the best defense against that runoff. So this is what drives us to zero in on that shoreline buffer area as our big concern. So I had a couple of ideas for preserving the vegetation in the shoreline buffer area. One, and I admit this is a blunt instrument, but I suggested, why don't we just cut the number of properties from 4 to 3? That would reduce the number of shoreline amenity areas from 4 to 3, and it would proportionally reduce the amount of vegetation that could be removed. You know, simple. And I realize there's drawbacks to that, and the camp is most concerned about that perhaps producing less revenue. I don't know for a fact, you know, some people will pay a premium for a larger lot, but I recognize that's a concern that they have about that approach. So the other approach is just to create stronger enforcement rules around removal of vegetation in the sensitive shoreline buffer zone. And I know we will have site plan control, but all I have to do is go around the lake in a boat to see that there's many instances of poor shoreline practices around the lake. Despite our efforts at education, we see lawns that run straight to the water. We see lots of mature trees removed. We see retaining walls constructed right down at the water. So a lot of bad practices somehow get through the all the regulations that already exist. So I guess what we're looking for, I know once the site plan control is in place, that's a very good mechanism for, and it is enforceable. But there's a period of time before the site plan control kicks in, you know, before the building permit is applied for, where basically anything can happen to the trees. So we're looking for mechanisms to protect those. And I'm open to the suggestions. The planners would know better than I exactly how to make that happen. So anyway, those are, you know, again, just backing up, our objective is to try and retain as much vegetation in the sensitive shoreline buffer areas as possible. The couple of ideas I had were, let's reduce the number of lots, you know, very simple. Or secondly, put some more enforcement around removal. But I'm open to other ideas as well. I mean, understanding what the objective is, I'm open to any creative suggestions about how to accomplish it.
Okay, Linda, thank you for your comments, and also thank you for the possibility of further discussion and being open around that. I think that's always helpful. So thank you. And with that, I do believe we are going to our next speaker, Aviva Rubin, as far as I can tell. Aviva.
Hi, thanks so much for letting me speak. I'm only going to take a couple of seconds because I'm in complete agreement with so many different things that have been raised. We are at 172 Fitzgerald Drive, so our property is the property that abuts right up against the camp property. Everything that Mario and Linda raised are like all of the concerns that we have. I just wanted to clarify something, because I did have a conversation with Rich Birch a couple of weeks ago, and my understanding was that property, the 30 meters that would retain the camp's access, the lakeshore access to the rest of those backlands, would actually not really be used for anything, and that the kids would be very, very unlikely to be going over there or using it at all. And from what he said today, he's talking about building some docks, and there would be some canoes there. And so that's right where we are. Like in the past, the kids from the camp used the dock that was across the bay, and it's a very small bay. So there's that concern, as well as the concern of how those lands might be developed and how many people might ultimately end up using that little tiny strip of land there between us and the next cottage that's going to be developed. So
all right. So your concern is with the retained lands, and we could ask Rich right now to clarify that point.
Yeah, hey, Aviva, great to see you again or talk. So yeah, our intention is that the retained lands have minimal use. Same as we talked about, like maybe a few times. So during the summer, we may 6 times, 8 times during the summer have a small group of kids arrive from the other side of the lake and come over to the retained lands for a cookout. They make dinner over a fire, a few hot dogs, that sort of thing, and then get in their canoe and go back. So, I mentioned the dock, it would be smaller than what's there now. The idea is to try to minimize concerns that we intend on having, building buildings. There's been, conversation today around us trying to move everything onto the retained lands. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a campsite on the retained lands, overlooking the retained lands, which is beautiful. We again echo all that. It's a beautiful area to look out over. That's why we like bringing kids to it. So I appreciate the concern.
Well, it is also, it's a very steep piece of property right there as well. And to put docks right at the bottom, which will be the only place that the kids can swim, and 6 to 8 times a summer. I know that's not a lot, but it was, anyway.
Okay, Haviva, great. I appreciate that. I noticed that our own planner, Curtis, had his hand up, and so perhaps would like to contribute to this. But the point of today, I completely hear what you're saying, and we've made note of it for sure. So Curtis, if you could speak to that, then that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to provide a bit of clarity for everybody listening as to the nature of institutional camp zones. So the way the zoning works is that the only permitted uses on an institutional camp property are those that were permitted as of the date of passing of a bylaw. So every time a camp wants to build something, they would essentially have to come into the committee and get a zoning bylaw amendment. So likely the most appropriate way to deal with the retained lands, and again, it's all subject to change. The camp is getting this important feedback, and by the sounds of it, will be amending their proposal, but would be to just have the exception removed off the institutional camp zone, and then with it, and provide obviously the residents have an idea what they would like to do with it, and then obviously come in for an application in the future. Similar to this, to seek permission to permit that use. So I just didn't want everybody to think that there was just carte blanche approval for institutional camp uses on those land zoned institutional camps.
Okay, that's very helpful. One thing I'm hearing today is that there are certainly, and I know we have one more person who wants to speak, but there are a lot of outstanding issues and questions around even not just the retained lands, but the current proposal. So again, today was really, as you mentioned, Curtis, it's for information to put all of this out there in the public and get the conversation going. I've also heard the idea proposed that we might actually end up having another public meeting around the next iteration of whatever this proposal is. So I'm just commenting on that. And Habiba, was that your main point that you wanted to contribute?
Yes, it was. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And so if we can, we'll move to, I think, our final participant, Crystal.
Yes, that's correct.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Okay, the screen looks funny here. Okay, I'm Andy Montgomery, and I'm at 1042 Livingston Lane, Dwight, Ontario, P0A1H0, and I'm the chair of the board of Camp Minneowi. And all I wanted to do today was just kind of echo some of Rich's things, but more address some of the specific things that came up here today. And I'll be very quick. With regards to the backland and the retained property, I hear you all loud and clear. The objections and the concerns you have, quite frankly, are things that were presented to us as options that we should consider, which we aren't considering. So I want to be clear about that. This idea that we would keep our 30 meters, which we are very open to turning into 60 meters, and keep all that backland and develop it as backland with a community and shared access to the lake and such, is something that we're not interested in doing. And in terms of our use for that land would be very, very, very minimal, very low density. We're talking no buildings really. So that I hope that message is coming across, and to Curtis's point, I think that it's not easy for us to make those changes anyway, and we're not looking to. With regards to the road, I live on a private road in Dwight myself, and when I purchased my cottage and built on it, quite frankly, there was an amendment in our or a clause in our deed that suggested it's a private road and we need to maintain the road, especially after our construction, and we did such things. So that's easy for us to include, and we would obviously include that. We've heard that from a couple of real estate agents we've spoken with, that's a common clause to have in a sale, so we can for sure make that a condition of the sale when these things happen. In terms of the right of way, I don't want to get into the whole whether we do or we don't. We'll let the lawyers work that out. We're very confident in our status with regards to the road. But as I say, we'll let that get worked out. And then I just wanted to kind of say, without trying to sound too, I'm hoping that we're not sounding aggressive, but we're in a situation, Rich said it well, we're in a situation where we have to do something. We're going to do something. Camp Minneowi is, I think, an asset to the lake, an asset to the community and into Huntsville. And we think it changes, it changes lives for the good. So we're really vested into making sure that camp continues, and for us to do that properly, we need to do something here. So if I'm a neighbor on Evergreen Trail, I'm just saying, if I'm a neighbor, I don't think I want it to stay zoned commercially. To me, I think that involves a lot of construction too, and a lot of things. And there is, as somebody said, there's I think 60 plus people that are allowed to use that property as it stands. So we're going to have to do something, I guess is what I'm saying. And what we're trying to do, we think, is the most friendly for the lake. We look forward to our conversations. I think we've got a scheduled call with the Mary Lake Association. I believe it's on Friday. So we look forward to that. We're trying to work with the community here. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that. So at this point, I will ask Crystal if there are any other hands that have been put up. I'm not seeing any.
I can confirm I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, so thank you for that to all members of the public who participated in this part of the meeting. And with that, I will ask if there are questions from committee members at this time of the applicants or Curtis or whoever with respect to this application. I have a question, but I can wait. All right. Seeing no one. Okay, Councillor Stone.
Sorry. So it is for information only.
It is.
And you've already suggested that this is getting all the information on the table. So now it can all be dealt with. That's wonderful. I just want to make sure that there will be another public meeting for the public to speak to committee.
Thank you for that. I had intended to ask Curtis how we might go about that, because it would seem to me that This can't be the only public meeting with regard to this application for a number of the reasons that were proposed. There are a number of areas that information needs to be provided. And I think in fairness, it would be good to have another public meeting to look at the new iteration or whatever it is. So Curtis, if I can ask you to comment on that, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we hear your feedback loud and clear regarding the second public meeting. I would also note that if the application changes significantly, it would probably be most appropriate to have a second public meeting anyways. I may defer the question either to Richard Clark, our Manager of Planning, or to Kirsten Maxwell, Director of Planning. I just want to ensure that I provide committee with the most accurate information.
Okay, perfect. And so I will ask Kirsten, because I can see her, I can see our Director of Planning. So I'm going to ask her if she could comment on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely, council or committee, sorry, can request that we hold a second public meeting. There's no issues with that whatsoever. It just requires a recirculation and another notice. So.
Okay, that would, I think, I'm seeing lots of heads nod, and certainly from my perspective, I think that would be very helpful. So noted. Can we say so noted on that? All right, that's great. So that answers your question, Councillor Stone? All right. I have a quick question of the applicant, if I may, and that is, of the three choices that were provided around accessing the site, I noticed one of them, the idea of extending off Penfold Lake Road, which is a municipal road, into the property. And that would be creating a new entranceway and fairly lengthy private road. But as far as I know, the lands, don't have the same obstacle. If you're using your own property, you wouldn't have cliff faces and that sort of thing that you do with Fitzgerald access. So I'm curious why that wasn't considered as one of the potential options, because that you wouldn't run into the same issues that you are with Fitzgerald, or with, well, Fitzgerald and with Evergreen. So if I could, Rich, I noticed you were about to answer, so that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That's a great question. And we're definitely open to considering that if we need to. Again, it's been a surprise to us that we don't have access to the road that we've been accessing. And so we're trying to work through that issue. And just a note, like we have both walked and actually been, done the conversation around bringing a road in from Fitzgerald, and it's actually not as cliffy as lots of roads I've been on in Muskoka. So there are two other options if we don't need to come in, if we're unable to, resolve this issue. Again, I think the best option for our neighbors, and we're going to continue to be a neighbor on this road, is to come in on the existing road.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate the openness to even consider the other fourth option if there is. I do think even if it's not as cliffy on the Fitzgerald side, there are other issues as to it's a private municipal unmaintained road, and so there are issues there as well that I would think you will hear about. And
Absolutely.
So it's not it's not an easy solution for sure. So
absolutely, we echo that for sure.
Yeah,
I understand
okay.
that.
Perfect. So that was my additional question that might lead to more information around that. That would be useful. Any other comments from committee? All right. Well, that was a long meeting and our long part of our meeting, and I want to say thank you to everybody who came to this part of the meeting today. It's always appreciated when we get input and we hear about all of the various issues, and I think so much of the input was quite respectful, and I appreciate where Camp Minneowi is coming from. So thank you for that. And before we go to the next item on our agenda, I need a 5-minute biological break, if that's okay with everybody. And so 5 minutes, it is, well, it's actually 2:58. So how about 5 after 3 that we will return? Okay, thanks. So I guess we're back live, I think. Crystal, are we back live?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I better not. So before we broke up, I neglected to end the public meeting portion of the meeting, so I will do that now. And that is to say that now that all comments have been received, I declare these public meetings respecting the above applications, the ones we just heard, to be concluded. All right, so with that, we are now going to our non-public portion of the meeting, and starting with the first site plan application that Curtis, I believe you're speaking to. It's the Alliancedon Holdings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The subject property is located at 210 to 240 Highway 60. The subject lands consist of 4 separate lots, which combined have an area of approximately 1.7 hectares and 287 meters of frontage on Highway 60, as well as 148 meters of frontage on Fairview Drive. The lands are presently vacant. The lot is designated mixed use area and zoned Highway 60 mixed use area with exception 0116. The owner is proposing to construct an 84 unit multiple residential building and a 260 meter squared commercial building. The multiple residential building would consist of 36 2-bedroom, 33 1-bedroom, and 15 1-bedroom plus 10 units. The proposed development is to proceed in 3 phases, with the first phase consisting of, with the first 2 phases, consisting of residential buildings and the final phase consisting of the commercial. Although the proposed development generally meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw, staff noted that the present site design was deficient by 11 parking spaces. As a result, the proposed commercial building will have to be removed from the plan or relief granted through a minor variance before final approval of the application can be given. Additionally, the additional site plan amendments, have been requested, including the location of exterior lighting standards, setback dimensions, curb cut locations, and the inclusion of additional internal pathways. A landscape plan was submitted in support of the application, showing an assortment of distinguished shrubs abutting Highway 60 and a 20-meter natural vegetation buffer abutting a stream at the rear of the lot. Staff have requested that the landscape plan be enhanced in consultation with the MTO to include additional plantings adjacent to the Fairview Drive and Highway 60 entrances, as well as the public roadways. And the reason I'd say in consultation with MTO is just that I think there's some concerns that, yes, MTO has expressed some concerns regarding large plantings adjacent to the right-of-way. So we're going to see what we can get away with and try to get enough in there to buffer the use appropriately. A traffic impact study, lighting plan, and stormwater management plan have been provided. The MTO has reviewed these studies and will require that the Highway 60 entrance be revised to a right-in and right-out only access, with main access being directed to Fairview Drive. Additional revisions to the stormwater management plan are required. Comments on the lighting plan are forthcoming as well. These studies and the associated plans are required to be revised to the satisfaction of the MTO and town staff prior to final approval of the site plan application. In accordance with a 2011 resolution from the Corporate Services Committee, the applicant is proposing to grant a 3-meter right-of-way along Highway 60 in favor of the town for the construction of a pedestrian walkway for public use, with the timing of the walkway construction left to the discretion of the municipality. In exchange, a maximum of $45,000 in planning, building, and cash in lieu of parkland fees are to be waived. Some minor amendments to the site plan are required. However, it is not anticipated that these outstanding comments will significantly alter the site design as currently proposed. As such, staff are recommending approval of this application subject to the conditions. The proposal for the site plan agreement would appear to facilitate development that would conform to the intent of the official plan and be consistent with the provincial policy statement. And I just want to note that all internal and external agencies were circulated. I realized in the report, and my apologies to committee, that I didn't sort of talk about the consultation we had with the accessibility committee, but I just want to reiterate that we did have, I think, a really good conversation, and a lot of the items that we discovered together were addressed through staff's comments, like our comment each other's. And Councillor Armour has assumed that role as the person reviewing the plans on behalf of the Accessibility Committee. So if there's anything I missed, I will happily follow up with Councillor Armour to ensure it's included. And no objections have been received. In view of the foregoing, staff are recommending approval.
Okay, thank you, Curtis. I noticed earlier John Gallagher said he was here available for any questions from committee, and I'm wondering if the applicant or John felt they needed to speak to add to this application. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Or I might just throw it out to committee. Crystal, you've appeared, so.
I do see one hand raised.
All right, thank you. Okay. Oop.
And there. How's
Okay.
that?
Thank you, John.
Thank you. I'll try and keep it brief as I know you've been at it for a few hours. I did want to say that we have been working with both the MTO and the town since April in coming up with the plan, and we've had multiple revisions to the application. This is for rental units, and it will be done in 2 phases with the first, or 3 phases. The first with 54 units consisting of 24 2-bedroom, 18 1 and 12 1 and den, and then the phase 2 would be 30 units of 12 2-bedroom, 15 1 and 3 1+ den. And there's a real need for 1-bedroom apartments throughout Muskoka right now, so my client's trying to deal with that issue there. The items that Curtis had mentioned, I had been talking with him this week, and he did raise the issue about some additional planting, and we had already made some changes to that as well. We probably will just remove that commercial building and not deal with any minor variance at this time. My client's eager to proceed with the construction of the building, and the commercial is something that they hope down the road, once they get the residential established, that there'll be a complementary use for the residents of that area. So he's not so concerned about rushing that one forward. We did have Duncan Ross's architectural firm prepare some really nice drawings. We did provide the design study guidelines to them when they were putting together the concepts, and we think that they've come up with a great design. Just in case anyone is curious, the height of the building is not where you see the soil there now. That's just packing down the subsoil so that when they get the footings in, it'll be even more dense for the footings of the building. The finished floor elevation will be pretty much level with the highway, and that's outside the floodplain. One of the main aspects we wanted to focus on here was protecting that creek that goes through there. And so in that regard, we've left buffering on both sides, left it in a natural state. And my client was also pleased to be able to support the extension of the Ferry Vista Trail, as the MTO does not recognize the asphalt above the curb on Highway 60 as a sidewalk. So we'll have that extended a little bit further. And we think it's a good plan, and we hope that you would support the application, and we're certain we can finish up working with staff to get the drawings that they want, but we're almost there.
Okay, thanks very much for that, John. Just quickly, the comment about the rentals, that's great. I am curious if they will be considered rental, if they'll be considered affordable or part of them or whatever.
It's the owner, Ravi Prasher, and I have been talking with the district, Jackie and Danielle, in that regard, and we are looking at different aspects, how we might be able to integrate some of that into the plan there.
That would be thumbs up to that. That would be great. All right. Are there questions from committee at this point? Yes, Councillor Stone.
Thank you. The additional housing coming to Huntsville is absolutely desired, and I thank you for that. when I look at the drawing, it looks all function and no form. Looks a bit like an army barracks. I hope that we can, as you suggested, do a better job with all the plantings and trees that are going to come up. My question is, what about amenity areas? If a lot of people are going to be living in that area, is there going to be a little parkette? What else do we have with this?
Good question, Councillor Stone. Not so sure about the barracks. There is, unfortunately, the 3D color drawings weren't provided for you. And if you had seen those, you may not be thinking the same.
Okay.
That being said, with this area of sort of setback from the creek, there's two distinct areas in behind the building. One's the 20-meter setback for the buildings and structures, but you'll notice as well there's a retaining wall that is along the rear. And so there's quite a significant area to the rear of the building where we're proposing some picnic tables and sitting areas. And I think someone has even suggested a small dog park fenced-in area for the residents there. But there's ample area there for that as well. There is a kids underutilized playground equipment up in Glenwood there. It only serves one subdivision. So I guess, there could be some opportunities to utilize that as well for any kids. But yeah, the whole back of the building there's an ample area for amenities and green space, which we've provided in the landscape plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Notice, Curtis, you would like to speak to the playground area, I think,
Oh,
or
well,
something else.
More to the amenity area as a whole. I was just going to note that if phase 3 isn't coming imminently, perhaps there's a chance to sort of transform that area into more of a parkette. And keeping in mind that they do have future plans for that, but maybe there's some inexpensive way to provide some sort of parkette that could function to serve the residents. So I can, but just putting it out there, and I can have those conversations with the applicant.
And John, do you think your client's willing to have those conversations around the
Well, I
park?
think so. My client wants to have a project that's not only financially feasible, but looks good and works well for the residents that are going to be utilizing that space.
Perfect.
So there's always opportunities to look at that. We did provide, like I said, amenity areas along the back of the building and such, and we do have access to the Ferry Vista Trail and other parks. But yeah, we're hopeful that we could do something there. And even if it were something in the interim, I'm sure he would have a look at that.
Okay. So what happened? We didn't get a copy of the drawings, to Councillor Stone's point. It would have been nice to
It was
see.
we had submitted color 3-dimensional drawings from Duncan Ross's office.
And is there any, maybe post this, we could still see them? Or
Yeah, I'd have to go through my computer
yeah,
to find them.
okay, no worries. I don't see anyone saying we have to see them right now.
But again, they kept to try with the timbers and the natural tones in the stone. And again, I think Curtis makes a good point about trying to make sure that we can get some trees in along the Highway 60 corridor. And it's kind of strange because even though they don't like to have large trees adjacent their corridor, you can see how far the property line is removed from the curb of the highway. It's got to be at least 30 feet. And, makes you think that, we should be allowed to be planting stuff in the highway corridor, but unfortunately they have rules against that.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions from committee? Seeing none, I do have a motion moved by Councillor Armour and seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 73-2020 HT, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation, conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town, and all other commenting agencies, and that the subject lots being merged on title. Any questions around that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee.
Thank you, Curtis, for everything today. So with that, I'm going to move to SPA 99-2020 HT 1384552 Ontario Inc. And Richard, you're on.
Thank you and good afternoon all. Through you, Madam Chair, the subject property is located at 203 Highway 60. The lot has an approximate area of 0.72 hectares, an approximate frontage of 78 meters on Fairy Lake, and approximately 89 meters of frontage on Highway 60. The lot is designated mixed-use urban, is within the Highway 60 corridor per the official plan, and is zoned Rural 4 with special exception 1495 in the zoning bylaw. The applicant is proposing to construct a 2,482.98 square meter, 4-story, 59-unit multi-residential condominium building. This application would amend an existing approved site plan dating back to 2007 for a 38-unit building occupying a similar footprint. As noted in staff's report, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, through an order dated May 10th, 2019, approved a 2017 zoning bylaw amendment application for increased height on the property from 11 meters to 15.1 meters. The current proposal takes advantage of this increased height through a terraced building that's to be 12.2 meters along the shoreline of Fairy Lake and stepped up to 15.1 meters near Highway 60. In regards to addressing urban design policies within the Highway 60 corridor, the building is oriented to the street and surface parking in front of the building has been reduced from previously approved by moving it primarily indoors. Mature vegetation abutting Crescent Bay Lane is also being maintained through tree preservation measures for privacy and visual screening purposes. Additionally, the proposed site design reduces access points to Highway 60 from 2 to 1 and includes plantings to enhance streetscape along the highway corridor and soften the look of the parking structure. A green roof over the parking structure is also proposed. A fisheries evaluation was conducted in support of a previous rezoning application to address natural constraints associated with the Fairy Lake shoreline and an adjacent creek mouth. Its recommendations for mitigating potential negative impacts through construction mitigation and enhanced level stormwater controls must be implemented through this site plan. Recommendations relating to maintenance of shoreline vegetation within 5 meters of the water's edge and enhancing shoreline buffer functions through native species planting must also be implemented. The proposed use conforms to R4 zoning permissions and complies generally with the applicable site-specific and general provisions of the zoning bylaw. However, changes to the plans and supplemental technical information will be needed prior to final approval. These changes are detailed in the staff report and include further details relating to parking, provision of loading spaces, additional shoreline preservation and planting measures, and demonstration of compliance with shoreline amenity area and maximum building height requirements. The site plan will also need to be revised to address any revisions requested by the relevant review agencies. With respect to stormwater management and construction mitigation, a peer review of the stormwater management report was requested by town, and the resulting comments have now been provided. The proponent will need to address these comments prior to final approval, and revisions to site plans, civil drawings, and landscape plans may be required. Comments have been received from building relating to the height of the proposed structure atop the roof, which require revision to achieve height compliance. Comments have also been received from the District of Muskoka Environment and Public Works Department, which note that the proposed development is in a water intake protection zone and therefore warrants submission of a satisfactory water source protection assessment report prior to approval. No other comments or objections have been received to date. The staff are recommending approval subject to conditions to address the outstanding matters noted in the report and any requested revisions from the relevant review agencies. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and I do understand that the applicant and their agent are also in attendance and would also be happy to provide any information that may be of assistance.
Thank you very much for that, Richard. Should I ask the applicant if they'd like to speak to this, or are they there just to answer any questions?
I do see the applicant's agent has raised his hand.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Crystal. Hello. Hi, Savas.
How are you? Members of the committee, to join you here this afternoon. I've been in since the start of this meeting, so I've had a roller coaster ride getting to this point. I don't really have a lot to add. I just want to first of all thank staff for the report. They addressed sort of all the outstanding matters that are sort of guided us to this point. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this application and this proposal actually just from the beginning. And we're happy to sort of bring it to this point where we're seeking approval for this application today. There are a couple minor issues that still need to be dealt with, as staff has indicated in the report and verbally here today. We are constantly working with them and trying to get to that point where final approval could be granted. So we're hoping the first step that committee grant approval today. I don't think any of the outstanding issues are insurmountable. There is some height compliance issues with mechanical and stairway issues on the upper floor of the building. Again,
Savas, I hate to interrupt. I just your audio is a bit like you're in a tunnel. Is there anything that you're doing? Is there any? Can you maybe speak directly? I don't know. I'm not the techno wizard here.
Interesting.
I feel like I'm kind of missing a couple of points, or maybe it's just me. Is anyone else just? If I listen carefully, I can hear it, but it's really now. Try again.
Maybe I'll just try to talk clearer. I don't know. I honestly.
It's a bit better.
It's a bit better. Okay. All right. I apologize for that. So basically, just what I'm saying is I was mentioning the height compliance issue. There's been some back and forth with the town over whether or not certain aspects of the building will contribute towards height or not. I think we're heading towards potentially solving that issue. There may be another application that comes in at some point in time to sort of deal with some encroachments that the bylaw doesn't necessarily consider. But I think that's something that between staff and myself and the development team, we can address and move forward sort of towards final approval. I think the building is just generally going to be something that is going to be eye-catching and a great improvement to the town of Huntsville in terms of that area of Highway 60. It's an impressive design. It's got a rooftop patio. It's got a lot of landscaping and a lot of softening of the appearance of the building from the outside. I think if anybody's been able to sort of visit the sales office and have a look at it, I think most people's impressions are that it's a very impressive building. So I think it's something that the town could use, and I'm excited that we've moved it forward to this point, and I'm hoping that we can get approval today and continue to deal with staff to finalize this and tie up all the loose ends. So I'm really here to have, hopefully here to answer any questions that the committee may have, but yeah, I just don't have that much more to add, but thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And just stay there because I'm going to ask committee at this point if you have any questions with respect to the motion. I could read it, but it's fairly straightforward. So are there any questions of Savas, of Richard? Seeing none? Okay, well then I will read the motion and I'll give Julie about 20 seconds to put it up on the screen. And I have the mover as Councillor Fitzgerald and the seconder as Mayor Terziano. It is recommended that the Director of Development Services approve site plan application SPA 99-2020 HT, and that the agreement be prepared to the satisfaction of the town, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign any necessary documentation, conditional on all final plans and drawings being to the satisfaction of the town and all other commenting agencies. Okay, so now that we've seen the motion, I would ask if there are any questions around that motion. Seeing none, I will call the question and all those in favor. And that carries unanimously. Thank you, Savas, for being there for questions, and thank you, Richard, for that. Lovely. So that is the end of our old agenda, and we do have under new business, I need to ask committee if they will consider a motion that we discussed earlier around the around the Muskoka Road 10 property. And so do I have 2/3 to consider this motion? Okay, that's great. So I do have a motion, if I might as well just put it on the screen, moved by Councillor Stone. I believe you said you would move it. And I will say seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald. It is recommended that the rules of procedure be suspended to allow for the addition of the following items. Oh, I already did that. Sorry, I've already done the 2/3. I have to read the motion. Sorry about that. 9A, new business re 388 Muskoka Road 10, request to allow minor variance application. Plus, there's a second item which I had forgotten about. My apologies. And re community planning permit update. That wasn't part of our original agenda. So now I ask, do all those in favor of putting those two additional items on? Can I vote? I can vote, right. Okay, we have that. So that carries. And I guess I don't have a motion in front of me. I apologize. I thought I was going to with respect to the property in Port Sydney, the one that Chris Zanetti spoke to earlier. Perhaps I could, while I'm asking what's happening here, Councillor Stone, you had suggested you would be interested in putting a motion forward with respect to the deputation we heard earlier. And you
That's
are
correct.
still.
So apparently it's just a margin of error as far as the square footage or meterage of the property. And they would have to wait 2 years to bring it back to Committee of Adjustment. That doesn't make sense. So I'm happy to move that we allow it to go forward.
Okay, all right. And Curtis, do you have did you have a motion or just, okay, I don't need to look to you because the capable staff here are putting something together that Councillor Stone, you can look at. And I actually did ask Councillor Fitzgerald if you wouldn't mind seconding that. Okay, perfect. So not to put pressure on Julie, but I think I'm stressing her out. So sorry. Bear with us. And so the second item that we agreed to consider Is Kirsten, are you doing the update on that? Richard is.
Yes.
Richard, okay. All right. Here we go. So I do have the motion. I already said the mover is Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Fitzgerald, whereas the zoning bylaw was passed by council on July 27, 2020, changing the zoning of 388 Muskoka Road 10 to permit the creation of one new residential lot. And whereas section 45, 1.3 and 1.4 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended states that no person shall apply for a minor variance from the provisions of the bylaw before the second anniversary of the day on which the bylaw was amended, unless council has declared by resolution that such an application is permitted. Therefore, be it resolved that submission of a minor variance application be permitted for 388 Muskoka Road 10. Any questions or comments around them? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you for the quick work on that and to the mover and seconder. All right, so we're on to the second item under this special part of our new business, and that would be you, Richard, speaking to it.
Yes, thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. Looks like we're almost done. The update I wanted to provide was just to advise this committee that the website for the community planning permit system, the information about that project has been added to huntsville.ca, and there will be a link. And I can show you, if I could share my screen, Chair Alcock, what it would look like. I just can figure out how to do that.
Okay.
I have too many things.
We close?
Yes.
Perfect.
So can you see huntsville.ca, their webpage?
Yes.
So this would be the homepage, which you're all familiar with. And under the building and planning section of the website, we now have a item under the planning title called Community Planning Permit Bylaw, or other way around, Community Plan. It should say Community Planning Permit Bylaw. And clicking on this, there would be a link to information about the project. And as we scroll down, also a link to myhuntsville.ca, which is the town's engagement site. And we will be using this location to push information out to the public and stakeholders about this project going forward. And if I click on that, you can see that we've already got the page constructed, and this is all live information. And as I said, we'll be communicating to the public through this platform, and they'll also be able to communicate with us as we move through the project. So all sorts of information on there. And that's where I just wanted to give that update to this committee. And
That's great, Richard. Quick question, how are we doing a blast to get information out to the public so they know to click on all of those different links?
Yes, so there will be a newsletter that we're putting together. And I think what we'll be doing is emailing everyone who we had on our list from the official plan process. And we'll also be using social media to indicate that this information is live, and we want you to register using both huntsville.ca and the My Engagement platform to be kept in the loop about this project going forward.
Okay, thanks. Did anybody want to ask Richard a question about that update? Well, Councillor Stone.
Sorry for talking so much today. So given our discussion about the application for the property that was coming off Canal Road, about tree cutting and should we put something in place beforehand. I know that is the major focus of the community planning permit. But before that happens, because I know it's going to be months before that happens, can staff simply add on to the application that there will be no site alteration until the site plan is approved? When it comes to committee right now, in the interim?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Richard. Yeah, sorry. You were about to respond.
Well, unless you advise me against it, I was just going to say that that was part of the discussion with Curtis, and site plan control was going to be used. But in terms of preventing tree removal and site alteration outside of a planning process, there really was nothing that we could do in that regard for that application. So without having a bylaw like the one we're working on, the community planning permit bylaw, or the other bylaws that both this committee and council has talked about, i.e. a tree bylaw or a site alteration bylaw, those things wouldn't be able to be addressed without an agreement being in place.
Okay, Councillor Stone?
So just to be clear, it needs to be done at committee, and we need to specifically add it if we think it's necessary.
Add it to, I'm sorry, are we talking about the previous application, or are we talking?
Until we get the community planning permit in place.
Like we did today, like we added a component. So you're saying, so the question to you, Richard, is in each of these applications that we're considering that we need to have sort of an additional condition. Is that what you're saying, Councillor Stone? Yeah, okay, Richard?
Well, I'm a bit confused, to be honest, by the question. I think the problem is what you're suggesting is a measure to be imposed outside of a planning process, and would require a separate piece of a separate bylaw to implement. So we wouldn't be able to just impose those kind of restrictions through our decisions on the planning application. We can only really say through imposing site plan control that prior to developing, they have to submit an application for a site plan agreement. And once that agreement is entered into, it would specify how much property needs to be protected, what protection measures are going to be in place. And you can actually, identify an area where no tree removal or site alteration is going to take place. And then it's enforceable because it's an agreement between ourselves and the applicant. So there is a step that needs to be taken in order to secure those types of protections. And that is the site plan agreement.
Thank you for that. And that's what we did today with the agreement that the application we were discussing earlier. So yeah. I think what you're saying, Richard, and that's the best approach we have before us right now under existing bylaw, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So any other questions of Richard about our process going forward? Seeing none, then I do have a motion moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that we do hereby adjourn at 3:46 p.m. There we go. All those in favor? That was a very fast hand up, Councillor Wiebe. I saw that. It's very quick. Thank you all for your patience.